Welcome to today's video. Today's video I'm going to be reviewing the Hypervolt Home 2.0. If you've not seen my review series before, I go from everything from unboxing these chargers right down to how the user app works. So if you're an installer or a user and you're thinking of getting an EV charger installed, this series of reviews should tell you everything you need to know if this is the right charger for you. Talking about finding the right charger for you, you also might want to find the right installer for you. To find an installer local to you, go to evnic.com/charge. Before we get to unboxing it, let's talk about some key features. It's sold in two colours. It's sold in this white and also very recently a black. It's a tethered only charger, so they don't do an untethered version of it. They also have built-in pen fault detection, which means that you won't need any additional earth rods or special earthing equipment to have this fitted. And it also has built-in DC leakage protection, which is another bonus to this charger. As well as this, it also has a separate dynamic load balancing CT clamp, and that dynamic load balancing CT clamp can also do solar. Now the Hypervolt packaging is quite nice. I quite like the fact that they got this lovely outline of the unit here, and then obviously branding down the side here. Now it's worth noting the box wasn't damaged when it arrived. It was perfectly fine. I have obviously opened it up to check everything was here when it first came. And then inside the box we have a drill point template here for drilling stuff, and basically where all the holes go. Inside here we have a CT clamp that comes included, so it's nice that they throw that in for free. And we've also got two spare screws for the unit in a second. Worth noting that all the packaging they've used inside here is actually recyclable, which is quite nice. There was actually a lovely plastic sheet covering over the unit, which is also recyclable, so it's nice to see that they are thinking more about the environment and the way they package these products. Now, as we've got the unit separate, it's worth noting that it didn't include any screws for fixing the back unit to the wall. What you have got here is a little holster for the gun here to keep the tethered unit holstered to the wall, so it's nice and neat. And that does come with some bolts and screws to bolt that to the wall, but there's nothing for the physical unit. The unit is obviously got the cable attached because it's a tethered unit. And as we look at this unit, let me just show you something which you won't notice and people may question before I open it up and then go, oh, he didn't mention that. Now, you've got some screws at the back and screws here. So the unit is slid onto the wall with the two anchor screws here after the template. And then you've got some two screws here that you can tighten up, which won't be able to visually see when the front unit's on. So these two units are obviously teardrop style, and then these back two will keep the unit fixed. Now, while we're up here, you also notice this casing here is protecting these two lock screws, sort of air vents here. Now, some people have mentioned to me before that this might cause water ingress having these two holes here, but to be fair, on Hypervolt, they've obviously pre-thought this anyway, because they've put this basically weather shield on top of the unit in the way the casing's made, which means that these are well adequately protected from rainwater and anything getting in there. And even if it's dropping down the back of the unit, I wouldn't expect it to then start rolling down this part of the unit. So if people have mentioned that in reviews, it's worth noting that. Now, once we've got those screws off, this top half just lifts straight off. Now, there is obviously a cutout here for the spark, which we'll explain the LEDs in a minute, but that spark's basically cut out so you'll be able to see it when it's lit up. You can't see it very visibly on the video here when I'm showing you, but basically you can see there, slid out, so it will show the light through. Now, I will comment that this casing material does feel a bit odd to me. I don't know what it's made out of. First, I questioned if it was 3D printed because of the texture effect on it, but I've checked with Hypervolt, it's not. Now, it's obviously not a moulded material because there's lots of bits where it's like cut out here and here and kind of, I'm presuming, glued together in a factory. So it's obviously a custom case they've made themselves in-house rather than an off-the-shelf piece of products. But I do expect that as the company grows, this will become plastic moulded like every other single charge case. But yeah, one small comment on that is that the fact that the casing does feel a little bit odd in the way it's designed. Very light material. Again, the same with this back material. It's very light, similar material to the last bit, and I assume that when they go to a moulding system that this would be greatly improved. This here's the spark with the LED, so you can see a strip of LEDs here, and a strip of LEDs here. If you're taking this off, you need a little bit more force than you think. I was worried that I was going to break it or damage it. So all you do is you lift it out like that and it comes away. And again, you've got some sort of foil insulation material here to protect the back of the LED connections here. I'm not sure what I think about the finish on this. Hopefully I can, they're going to remold the case and include this basically built into the casing design, so it's a little bit neater. So hopefully we'll see. What we'll see is this pre-molded into this somewhere, and then a fly lead off this to then connect it into the back of the board, which obviously you have got a fly lead at the moment for connecting this in, which is this fly lead here. While we're sticking with the LED strips, you can obviously see there is a set of LED strips around the outside of the unit, which you can see here, here, and here, and then obviously some on the bottom here. Now, my, again, small little bit is I'd like to see this properly made into the casing rather than the strips they've used. The strips they've used, they've kind of snotted them in with like a glue gun. I know why they've done that. They've obviously done it so as the unit gets old, that they don't just drop out and become saggy in the unit. But it's just not a finish I'd like to see on a production product personally. But it works. There's nothing wrong with doing it this way. I just like them to neaten it up just a little bit. This fly lead, for example, feels quite loose and wiggly wobbly. Again, it would be nice if it was all embedded, embossed in the casing, just to bring it up just a little bit more in standards for me. Inside though, what we have is quite a lot of really decent components. So we've got obviously a Panasonic relay here, and what looks to be maybe a possible chance of maybe an earlier design where they had another Panasonic relay here, or another piece of component here on an old PCB design. There's also some trails here for what possibly could have been a USB by looking at the solder joints. And then here we have another relay from a company that I'm not too sure. I've not seen many of these ones, but these two relays are all part of the inbuilt pen fault detection. Now it's also got DC leakage protection, but you still need to use an RCD on it. Now Hypervolt explained to me the reason why they still want you to still use an RCD on it is a lot of electricians will fit an RCD anyway, and a lot of properties already contain RCD boards, so you shouldn't really double up on RCDs when you fit them, and that's why they've gone with a non-RCD approach. But they're listening to the market and they are looking at making a newer version with this, possibly with an RCD inbuilt as well, so an electrician wouldn't need to install an RCD as well. But because it's got DC leakage protection, you don't have to use the really expensive RCDs for stopping DC leakage, because that's all built into the system, as well as the pen fault system. Now, one comment I've made on pretty much every single ChargePoint I've ever reviewed is down here on these terminals. Now, these screw terminals, I prefer to see like a Wago style block, like a quick connection block, a low maintenance block, one that doesn't need torque tightening or screwed in. Now, these are screw terminals. Now, I will say this is a bloody good quality contact. Really decent high quality screw terminals, to be fair on them, and it's in a place of the board that's not right on the edge where it could crack if you tightened it up too tight. It's it's quite centered on the board, so it should take a lot of pressure to try and do any damage to it. But I don't like to see these screw terminals on blocks, to be honest. I do prefer Wago style blocks, because I know some engineers are just lazy, and I've seen torque wrenches used on not torque wrenches, sorry, impact drivers used on PCBs to tighten up electrical connections, and I prefer those Wago style blocks. Some people argue that they don't, but I do like to see them. Now, at the bottom here, we have two compression glands. You've got a compression gland for the Type 2 cable that's already done, and then you've got another compression gland for bringing in your own connections, which is nice to see that they've included the compression glands. They pre-drilled the holes. I personally don't like screwing into terminals or drilling holes on an IP rated case, because I might be drilling it in the wrong place. These are pre-drilled, pre-glanded for you, which is really nice. Unfortunately though, there is no option for rear entry, which I prefer rear entry. I think they look neater on installs. Personally, I'd always have a rear entry on my own ChargePoint, because I just think they look neater on walls. But the fact is, a lot of units now have bottom entry only and no rear entry, but maybe hopefully in the future Hypervolt will redesign a way of putting a rear entry, because that is my preferred method. It looks neater on the wall, especially when you've got like these lights lit up on this ChargePoint. Just be nice just to have it, no cables on show coming in at the bottom. Moving on to this bit here, this is obviously a Raspberry Pi. Now, if we look very closely, it's actually a Pi Model 3. So let's just bring that up to the camera. You can see here that it's a Raspberry Pi 3, and just here we have a little dongle inserted. And that little dongle is to turn this unit into a Wi-Fi station. So that Raspberry Pi now has Wi-Fi with this little dongle plugged in this USB. But we've also got here an Ethernet connection, so you'll be able to bring an Ethernet connection through this pre-drilled nipple and then put the Ethernet in there. Now, just below that, what we have is where the CT clamp comes in. Now, their CT clamp is capable of two things. It's capable of fuse protection, and you can set the fuse protection just down here with this tiny little screw terminal down there is the selector switch for the CT clamp. So you set the amps and you can set it on there, and it's a hard version of turning it to the correct CT setting for the CT clamp. And I like the fact that it's a hard physical switch, because it means a user can't go into it and accidentally change the settings and, you know, damage their own cable or damage their own main fuse coming in. So I do like the fact that they've used a physical hard connection inside the box that a user doesn't have access to. Really quite good thinking on that. The CT clamp can also do solar export. Now, if you've got a battery, it's not ideal, but if you're going to have solar only or just a solar roof and you want to make sure that you can deal with solar, you know, you're not exporting to the grid during the time you're producing solar, then this CT clamp will see that if you're exporting, it will then start charging the car. And there's a couple of settings that you can change in the app on the way that will behave. So they have thought about giving the user control, and it also depends what car you've got, because some cars don't like pausing. So if you've got a car that doesn't like pausing, you can set it to trickle. So they have given that option in the user app, which is quite nice because it means everyone can decide what they want for each car and how their car does it. Another small criticism I found on this board is that on the board we have these two fly leads. So we've got a live and a neutral fly lead from the bottom of the board here, soldered directly onto the board, by the way, which has been done in the factory. Soldered directly onto the board, fly leaded over to the top of the board. Now, they've obviously done this because they're trying to bring the high voltage electrics from this bottom part of the board to this top part of the board, and rather than work out a channel through the PCB, they've decided just to basically put some fly leads on. Now, I hope we see an iteration where they get rid of these two fly leads, because basically for me they're a point of failure, and I also don't like the fact that they're just basically soldered directly onto the board. Hopefully we'll see a small iteration of this design. Most companies like this, they always like to iterate, and I'm speaking to the Hypervolt tech team, they are very much about constantly iterating and improving the product with every single generation, every single order as they come out the factory, which is what you'd expect from any of the companies that are making these ChargePoints at the moment. So it's nice to see that Hypervolt are doing that. One other thing I'd like to see them iterate away from is down here we've got a small fan. Now this small fan, they've told me, doesn't really often turn on, and you can see the vent holes here. There's only 4 vent holes here at the bottom for getting some airflow into here to keep the unit cold, and they've got obviously a temperature sensor in here that if the unit gets too hot, it'll blow some air in. Now, a couple of issues I have with that. First of all, if there's a bit of a dusty area like where I live on a new building estate, there's lots of dust. If this fan was turned on, I'd be having dust blown all around inside my unit. My other small issue is the UK is a climate country. We have a lot of humidity, and having this opening, blowing possible humidity in here, possibly causing condensation, is not something I'd like to see. I'd like to see a fully sealed unit in here. Now, this is one of the first units I fitted which actually has a key type screw, and to be honest, it has some advantages and some disadvantages. First of all, I like the fact that the holes are all pre-drilled for the fitting of the ChargePoint, because you're not drilling into a waterproof casing. But these keyhole designs at the top, I always never feel that you can get them 100% perfectly tight at the top. However, the two bottom screws aren't keyhole type, and means that you can secure the unit to the wall without it going anywhere. Once it's all connected to the wall, you want to bring in through the bottom your power cable and also any CT clamps you're fitting. The CT clamps go into a terminal style block that clicks into the board. Really easy to do. There seems to be a fair bit of room at the bottom of the board for if you've got a bigger cable to bring in. Also, you're going to have to set the internal dip switch to what you need, so the correct ampage, and also if it's going to be doing dynamic load balancing, make sure both of them are set on the logic board inside this unit. Once they're set, you want to clip in the LED panel that makes the spark at the front and make sure you plug it in as well. Put the cover over the top, and then you've got 4 fastening screws in total, 2 each side. Whiz them in and then plug the unit in and ready to turn on. When you've turned the unit on, you'll know it's in pairing mode because it'll do a flash mode where you'll go white and flash. Now, as an engineer, you can be really useful and put the internet in for the user if you've gone for Wi-Fi connection over the Ethernet port. Now, if you've gone for the Wi-Fi option of installing this, the easiest way of doing it is put your phone into airplane mode, look for a local Wi-Fi network, which is Hypervolt, followed by a couple of numbers, which are the serial number of the unit. Connect to that, go on your Safari and go to hypervolt.energy, and that link will take you into the setup process just to put the user's Wi-Fi details into it so it's saved. Now, as a user, you'll need to download the Hypervolt app, and if the engineer hasn't set the Wi-Fi up, do not worry. As long as you've got the Hypervolt app and you're near the unit, turn Bluetooth on and the unit will connect to the device with Bluetooth to then input your own Wi-Fi details, which is a really clever idea. It means that even if the engineer forgot to do it, or if the engineer fitted it outside while you were out because he had access to the power cupboard where you were going, etc., it means that you can still go ahead and set up the Wi-Fi at a later date. What I do quite like about the Hypervolt app is it's really easy to sign in. You can sign in with Google or you can sign in with Apple, and it's really quick. And even if you haven't set up an account and you just press sign in, it will pre-create the account for you, which is really clever to see. I'm a little bit annoyed that even though the app design's quite nice, it's quite bright. I'd like to see a dark mode. I can imagine it would wake you up quite a bit if you wanted to check the status of your charger just before you went to bed. So hopefully Hypervolt will make a dark version of this app. This unit does allow you to customize the LEDs which are on the front and the side of the panel. Now, as many people may see from my Alienware review, I quite like LEDs. I'm a big fan of color LEDs. So some people may find this a gimmick, especially my wife. She can't stand flashy LEDs, which is why she'll be happy there's a no effect option or the effect option, and Hypervolt have put options in there to turn the brightness down at several levels all the way to completely off. What I'd like to see though is more customization of the LEDs, allowing user to pick what colours he wants, where and when. So maybe a picture of the ChargePoint side and front, and the user picking up where the LEDs are and what colour they'd like the LEDs to be. So Hypervolt, be a nice customization. You've made all the effort putting these LEDs in. Give the user a little bit more flexibility about what they can do with that. The charger has one CT clamp which can do dynamic load balancing, and it can also do solar. What's nice about it is, although a lot of the competition are also doing solar with one CT clamp in very similar ways, this unit does allow you to pick 3 methods of the way you'd like it to charge. Now, you have an eco mode, which will basically use a little bit of grid and always top the grid up so you're reaching the 1.4 kilowatts, which is the minimum EVs will need to charge at before they go to sleep mode. So if you're producing only half a kilowatt of solar, it will use the rest from the national grid. Great way of doing it. There's another mode called boost mode, which is basically you want to use your solar, but you always want a full charge during that period, and that will use the national grid to top up your solar up to 7 kilowatts. So not the best if you want to be the most eco. And then they've got basically a really green eco mode coming, which at the moment of reviewing it, it isn't released to the public. What that will allow you to do is charge from the solar when you're producing a minimum of 1.4 kilowatts, and if it's any less, it'll put the car to pause mode. Now what this means is, because you've got the one CT clamp, if the house picks up and you start to use some of your solar, it drops below 1.4 that you can give the car, it will go into pause mode, and that is what I want to see. This is the one way I personally charge with solar, and it's nice to see that they are actually giving you all 3 options. However, it is worth noting, as they only have one CT clamp, if you have an EV battery, for example, it will not know the difference between the EV battery exporting or the solar exporting, which means that depending on your setup and the way you've got your EV set up and the way you've got your solar and battery set up, it could mean that if the solar stops and the battery then starts exporting, the Hypervolt wouldn't know the difference between those two parts of export and would then start charging the car. There's other ways that they could fix this, and one would be implementing a second CT clamp, and another way could be, if it's a certain brand of manufacturer, as in Tesla, they could integrate maybe into the API and see if that's exporting and then use that to pause the charger. A couple of features I like seeing on the app is there's a lock function. Now personally, I've never seen the point of locking your charge point so no one else can use it. People don't go around driving on driveways, stealing electrons, because let's be honest, they wouldn't really get that much money out of your driveway by stealing a bit of electrons, but I can understand a lot of people find this something that they want and a risk, and the manufacturer has put a lock function to lock the charge point if you so wish and worried that people are going to steal maybe a couple of pounds of electric off you. They've also allowed the ability to change the ampage, so you can drop it from 32 amps to a lower setting, maybe even 16 amps or even lower than that. There's a couple of reasons why you want to do this, but have a look at my videos why you may want to do that. And you've also got the option of setting your energy tariff, so setting what price you pay per different segments of the day, and this means that it will all feed into the analytic data and the charge schedule information. Once you go into the schedule, you obviously have the option of charge immediately or set a charge schedule. If you go into set a charge schedule, you can set what time and what time you'd like it to finish, and you can set a couple of these, more than one, if you wished. What you can't do is set that you'd only like it to happen on Monday to Friday, or only happen on Monday, or only do it on a Saturday. You can't select just days, you can only just set schedules as a whole. So it'd be nice to see Hypervolt maybe address that issue, maybe set maybe Monday to Friday, Saturday to Sunday, or allow you to pick individual days separately. It'd also be nice maybe if they could give you the option of also adjusting what ampage they could charge in that half an hour or hours that you've set for charging, but not particularly as important as maybe setting the days. Which leads me on to another thing, which is the gold standard for me of EV charging is, can it work with Agile? As in, can it handle dynamic half an hour price changes? And unfortunately it can't, which is a bit of a shame really, because Hypervolt and a lot of their media, a lot of the stuff I've seen them post online is they call themselves a software company. They really need to develop this part of the app, because I see this being the new gold standard for the way all energy companies work. I think all energy companies are going to go on some form of dynamic tariff like this, and we're also seeing new tariffs from people like Octopus with the intelligence system that changes every single day, very similar to Agile, but very set 5-minute or 20-minute charge to get the most of V1G charging and other charging systems. Now I know from what Hypervolt have said in other media stuff that they are looking at V1G, and that's going to be coming, but it'd be nice to see maybe them integrate more with stuff like Octopus Agile and V1G and have it all there in the user app so the user can see it, because at the moment there's no ways that I can see that you can actually input any of that information or work with any of those really intelligent deals that are out there at the moment. Now, one of the unique features of the unit is you can actually do this. Alexa, open Hypervolt.
Okay, here's Hypervolt. Welcome to your Hypervolt Home. Try asking set brightness for your current status.
Current status.
Your car is not currently being charged.
Thank you. Now, what's useful about this is that you can find out the current state of the charge, what the charger's doing, and it just gives you a bit of peace of mind without opening the app, and it's quite a nice little piece of integration that they've done here. Now, the analytics page gives you all the information of charge sessions, how much it's cost, how much energy you've put in, and on the mobile, it's not particularly easy to see. And I've always had this problem with analytic data being on apps like this, is that you don't really want to see it on your mobile. It's not as intuitive, and I've always commented that maybe they should give you an option to email it to yourself, or just basically have a better form of it. And Hypervolt have actually addressed this issue. You can log onto their website, you can log in with the same username that you used on the app, and you can view the analytical data right there on the website on a big screen and see it in more clear detail than looking at your tiny little phone screen, which is fantastic. And what's nice to see is that the app and the website seem to work together. So you can set some of the charge stuff on the website on the app and vice versa, like the charge rate, turn the lights off, and also see all the analytical data. So that's really, really nice to see, really nice development there. In summary, I think this is probably one of the better looking large charge points. I like the fact that the cable management around it works really well, the way they've designed it. The holster that's included just means that it does look like a good charge point. Even with the lights off, if you're not a fan of the gimmicky lights, and I can imagine a lot of people, it will drive them nuts, even with the lights off or dimmed right down, it's still quite a nice looking charge point, especially the black one as well. They do look well. They've customized that really well, but it is let down by the quality for me of the actual casing, the fact that it's got a fan at the bottom. I just don't like the fact they've put a fan. Now, Hypervolt told me this rarely turns on in the UK, but if it really turns on, stop using it. There's better ways to deal with heat management on a charge point than fitting a fan at the bottom. However, it does work with solar, which is nice to see, and they've given you free options of working with solar, and that's really, really nice to see. But unfortunately for me, it doesn't work with Agile, and that for me is the gold standard for a charge point. If I'm having a charge point, for me, it needs to work with Agile, needs to integrate with Agile, and the other inventive tariffs that Octopus and other energy companies will be coming out with over the years, and Agile for me is the gold standard. It does, however, have some really, really nice features with Alexa integration, which is unique. I don't think anyone else has got anything like that which integrates with Alexa, so that's really, really nice for them to see. If you're interested in a disco charge point and you do like this charge point, then check out evnic.com/charge to find an installer for one of these. Thank you very, very much for watching this week's video, and I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.